Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for coming here and being interested in what we can do to get our country back on the right track and really make government work. You know, after seeing the work I did on San Diego City Council for 4 years, that I'm willing to fight for our neighborhoods and our communities. I'm willing to take on tough issues, not walk away from them, not go along to get along, but to really try to figure out how we resolve these long-standing, simmering issues so that we can actually make government work. When I walked into San Diego City Hall, the city was predicted to go bankrupt. They were calling us Enron by the Sea. They had raised the cost of living in San Diego, the water bills doubled, they were trying to raise taxes, and they had cut our services. They ground out fire stations, they eliminated after-school programs, daycare programs, cut library hours, delayed road repairs, and of course our roads were falling apart. And I said, look, the problem with City Hall is not that we don't have enough money. The problem is that we're not spending the current money that taxpayers are giving us in the right way. And what we were able to do over 4 years is we were able to address the city's financial crisis. We reformed pensions. We balanced the budget without tax increases. And we were actually able to find the money to start restoring services. We had a great champion who brought a lot of attention to the browned out fire stations right here at DeMaio. We were able to restore that. We were able to get our library hours back up. And we started looking at ways to pay down our infrastructure deficit. In essence, we were able to make government work for the first time in a long time in San Diego, make us a national model. I want to do the same thing in Washington. I want us to address our financial crisis. I want us to get people back to work. I want the American dream to be within reach for the American people again. Most importantly, I want us to provide you the services you've already paid your tax dollars for. Veterans benefits, security at the border, having a proper response to public health challenges like Ebola. We need to see our government working again. Now that means that we have to take on both political parties. I'm willing to take on my own political party to challenge them to change. I'm challenging them to stop being the party of no and start being the party of solutions. You can't just criticize the other guy. You've got to talk about what you need to do. I want them to be more inclusive and reach out to all communities and start reflecting the diversity of this country. And finally, I want them to get off the divisive social issues that, frankly, in my opinion, are none of government's business in the first place. Let's respect religious freedom. Let's respect personal freedoms. Let's let people decide social issues in the context of their own faith and family beliefs and their own personal priorities. These are politicians that can't balance a checkbook. Why are we asking them to weigh in on how we live our lives? I believe that we can make government work like we did in San Diego. We can make government work in Washington. With your support, I will work every day to achieve that goal. Questions?
Me and other residents of this district?
I think the 3 reasons would be, number 1, I'm independent. I'm willing to take on powerful interest groups if it means doing the right thing. When I was down at San Diego City Hall, one of the groups that came to me said, hey, we need to build a new city hall for our city government. And I said, are you joking? This is 2008. You haven't repaired our roads, our sidewalks are falling apart, our libraries have leaky roofs, and you want to build a brand new city hall? The cost of $400 million, 1 million square feet of office space? He said, I think that our priority ought to be rebuilding neighborhood infrastructure, and that we ought to have a chance to renegotiate our leases currently in our current buildings, and that we can save more money by renegotiating leases. Now, the developers didn't like that I did that, but I stood my ground. Then when the downtown developers said, hey, we want the development agency to get the money from the general fund so that we can subsidize condo projects, and subsidize Petco Park and Qualcomm Stadium, I said, look, we have to be thinking about neighborhood services. And so I teamed up with Don Fry, a Democrat. And what we did was we demanded that the redevelopment agencies start paying back the general fund, that which they took. And it gave us money to restore important neighborhood services. Labor unions. government labor unions at City Hall wanted to demand overtime and big salary increases and bonuses and big pensions. I said, no, we can't afford this. We ought to have a fair compensation model that gives pensions and salaries that are no better, no worse than the hardworking taxpayers who they develop. They told me if I pursued pension reform, that they would end my political career. And they spent a lot of money against me in the mayor's race. It wasn't a mistake. We needed to solve that pension crisis, and I'm proud of the work we did. I will stand up for you every single time, even if it means political blowback from power holders.
Thank you very much. Another question is, how would you implement your ideas in such a divided context?
I think first and foremost that we need fresh and new ideas. When I came into San Diego City Hall, nobody had ideas on what to do with the pension crisis, what to do with the budget, what to do with our infrastructure, what to do with our water rates. And I said, we're not getting fresh ideas, so I'm going to start offering bold new plans. The roadmap to recovery. You always see me on TV with big binders, big plans. I think it starts first with a fresh set of ideas. The debate in Washington is stale. Second, you also have to be willing to look beyond party label and not look at whether something's a Democrat idea or a Republican idea, but rather look for a good idea. And that means that if there are things in the Democrat set of plans that I think I could agree with on issues, I'm going to say so. I'm going to compliment them. I say I'd like to work with you to get that done. And I'm going to try to grab ideas from the Republican side as well and see where we agree. You know, if we agree on a problem, on 40 or 50% of the remedy, and in most problems you're going to find widespread agreement on about 40, 50% of the issues. Parties tend to fight over the remaining 60 or 50% that they don't agree. Well, if we agree on 40 or 50%, let's get that done. Let's get it done, bank it, and then we can start looking at ways of resolving the rest. Finally, I think we have to change the rules back in Washington. Right now, when the House passes a bill, it goes to the Senate, Harry Reid blocks it. If the Senate passes a bill, it goes to the House, Speaker Boehner blocks it. Both sides hold hostage good ideas. And so I want to change the rules, like I did with Donna Fry on the City Council, to lower the threshold for consideration of an idea, debate, and a vote. I don't fear debating a piece of legislation that I disagree with. There's nothing to fear about that. So why do we not give the minority party the courtesy of giving them some floor time to offer an idea and call for the question and have a vote? I think that we need to change the rules to open up the process, and I think we'll have more centrists work together rather than that new system.
Thank you very much. Another question is, how will you bring more jobs to San Diego?
How do you bring more jobs to San Diego? The best way to create jobs is to stop government from killing jobs. I think one of our biggest challenges is that we have regulations and mandates that are killing the small businesses in this country by raising the cost of what it takes to actually keep a business going. Second, we need to reform the tax code so that it's fairer and flatter and simpler. We have big business corporations that have been able to get lobbyists to get themselves sweetheart tax deals. Last year, General Electric paid $108 million. $108 billion. Do you know how much they paid in taxes? Zero. I talk to small business owners, I say, how much do you pay in taxes? The average percentage is 50%, half of their earnings in taxes. We cannot have the American dream for workers and small businesses when you have a tax code that takes that much. Third, you can cut red tape, you can reform the tax code, we have to back up the American worker. The way we back up the American worker is to make sure that our K-12 education system is strong. I talk to business owners all the time, and they tell me that our children are not emerging from our school system with the skills they need to compete in a 21st century economy, particularly in the areas of science, technology, engineering, and math. In addition to a K-12 education system that works, we absolutely have to have accessibility and affordability for college. That's why, notwithstanding negative attack ads, I have never taken a position, any other position other than to support our student loan program. And in fact, I've laid out a pretty bold plan to reduce interest rates, to make it more affordable, so that these kids are able to afford a college tuition and able to repay those loans. Those are the three keys to economic success: cutting red tape, reforming the tax code, and preparing our workers to navigate and compete in the 21st century economy. We do those three things, and the fundamentals of the economy start perking up. We start creating jobs again.
Thank you. There was a question, do you oppose the federal student loan program? But I think you already answered it. Unless you want to ask.
Do I still get 2 minutes to talk about
Yes.
student loans? All right, I love it. Okay, so I was taken in by the Jesuits at age 13. My dad left with my mom 2 weeks before she died. I was given a scholarship to get through high school. They raised me through high school, and I earned the scholarship to Georgetown University. I only had 36 bucks cash in my pocket when I showed up. Without student aid, without student loans, I would not be who I am today. I have a debt to repay. I'm paying it forward. And that's why I'm going to fight for more affordable college tuition in terms of reforming the pension system in the California State University system as well as UC system. The same reforms we used in San Diego City Hall, I believe we need to use in our post-secondary education system. I'm also going to really focus on reforming our student loan program. We're going to do a couple things under my proposal. And by the way, some of these ideas I borrowed from President Obama. Sometimes Democrats have good ideas with technology. Number one, let's open up the student loan market to more competition than just the big banks. Community banks and credit unions are not allowed to service student loans. Nobody has given me a good answer as to why. Competition always makes it for better products and services. Let's open up the student loan market. Second, the average student loan interest rate is 9%. That's absurd. I want to benchmark it to the Treasury note, 2% currently. And education is an investment in our economic future. And so benchmarking it to the Treasury note, which is a long-term 30-year note, is, I think, a common sense way to do it. Third, banks force people into default when they can't make their student loan payments. They don't allow them a period of workout. Why are we allowing that? If you have a mortgage, they give you a little bit more leeway than your student loan. Why? Because the federal government has backfilled those loans. We need to change that so that people are given a workout plan before you force them into default. Those are important reforms that I know will make these student loans more affordable.
Thank you for keeping time.
She's got the little red
I
button over there, so
know.
I know that I'm not going to attempt any disciplinary actions here.
There's a question by somebody. It reads, my daughter is a high school senior. She just turned 18. This will be her first election. Tell me why she should vote for them.
I think there are three reasons why. The next generation is increasingly coming on board and voting and supporting me. In fact, we've got an amazing team of young high school and college students that are working my campaign, about 200 to 300 of them each week, volunteering, interning, and working the campaign. Yeah. Why? Number one, this next generation gets what I told you about the social issues. They don't want government looking at their cell phones. They don't want government in their private lives. They don't want government in their healthcare decisions. They want to control their destiny. And I think that we need to get both political parties out of it. We need to settle those issues in the context of personal freedom. Second, they are a lot more in tune with the fiscal crisis that we face. They recognize that we are stealing from them. That because of the spending, out of control spending, because of the debt that we are incurring today, they will have to pay higher taxes and they will have less money for their quality of life services than we have. That's wrong. We cannot saddle them with generational debt. Third, they understand that the American dream is harder and harder. I mean, this should be a notion that in this country, we should be getting better at the American dream than worse with each generation. We should be learning mistakes from the past and making it easier for our children to have a better life than we have. I built my company from nothing, despite my challenges in childhood. Had no financing from big banks. I started it on 2 credit cards. Was lucky, worked hard, and built 2 successful multi-million-dollar companies. But if I were to try to do it all over again, starting from my challenges in 1993 and do it today, 21 years later, I would fail. I wouldn't be able to make it because the world has changed. It's a lot harder. We can't let that happen. And they understand that their opportunities are less. That's why they're supporting it. I'm sorry, it's my fault. Sorry. For those of you in the back that couldn't hear, I'll go ahead and I'll repeat myself. Okay.
title here. What can you do to get the federal government to enforce laws that protect our borders?
Oh, it's a key issue. Can you really even agree with this notion that this country, which can do so much, can't even secure its own border? Because that's what the politicians basically are telling us, because the border has not been secured. How many years have we all talked about this being an issue? And yet they still haven't gotten it done. Border security needs to be the prerequisite, the foundation for immigration reform. I'm a supporter of changing our immigration system and improving it. Expanding visa programs, making the visa programs not a lottery but more strategic. Enforcing E-Verify and sanctions against employers that skirt the law. Making sure that we hold folks accountable for having a job and not going on public assistance. All those things, I think we need to make those changes in our immigration system. And we need to do it with a tone and tenor that's respectful. I think there have been extreme factions in the Republican Party that have not been respectful in how they talk about this issue. San Diego, I think, could show the way forward here, because we have a lot of diversity in our city, but we are very respectful. We're very integrated. I want to bring a San Diego tone to this immigration debate. But securing the border has to happen in three ways. Resources, to make sure that we have the infrastructure and the manpower there. Number two, technology. We have now aerial drones that can have complete coverage of that border. And third, we need to have the legal ability to turn people away who do not have the legal right to enter the United States. We need to pass true border security. And Mr. Peters had an opportunity to vote on a bill that would do these three things, but he chose not to, because Nancy Pelosi said we're not having any Democrat support for that honest bill. I think that was a mistake, and I think we need to get that done. Finally, I would remind you that immigration is not the only reason why we should secure the border. ISIS and Ebola, two big other reasons why we have to have border security.
Thank you. Your last sentence will segue to the next question. With the unrest in the Middle East, how can we increase our support for Israel?
Well, first and foremost, Israel has been a loyal ally of ours for decades, and I'm a strong supporter of Israel. I do believe that we have, in essence, a battleship capability with our relationship with Israel. I ask some folks in my own party who say, no foreign aid, we're not going to be involved anymore. I say, well, do you think the Middle East is a hotbed region, that there's a lot of strife and there's a risk of things happening in the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years that would threaten our national security? Oh yeah, it's probably one of the hardest regions, and it's most likely to be the region where we have a problem. Okay, if you agree with that, how much do you think it would cost us if there was a flare-up and an issue that happened in the Middle East? How much would it cost us if we had to go and establish a bulkhead, establish a presence, and then deal with the issue? Well, we know that. We're talking $300, $400 billion based upon Afghanistan. And that's a lot of money. When you break that down over 30 years of a risk time frame, that's a lot of money per year. Or we can approach it this way. We already have a bulkhead, we already have a battleship. It's called the State of Israel. And our relationship with them, our partnership with them really is about mutual security. Our relationship gives us intelligence about what's going on in the Middle East. They buy, most of the aid comes right back to the United States, about 80 to 90% comes back to the United States in the form of purchases of weapons and systems from the United States. So it's good for our economy. A lot of those dollars do find their way here into San Diego. And then finally, we have this ready-made capability that when things happen in the Middle East in the next 30 years, that we have the ability to go partner up with them and deal with them. I think that we have to look at it from that standpoint and no other.
What is your position on the U.S. policing the world to combat terrorist organizations such as Al-Qaeda, ISIS, etc.? And there's a second part. Would you agree to send additional ground troops abroad?
Well, I think that the question itself, I think we need to edit it. What is your view on policing the world to deal with terrorist threats? I don't think that policing the world is our responsibility. I do believe that dealing with terrorist threats is in our national interest. So let me answer the question from that standpoint. I believe that this country has intervened in conflicts and allowed mission creep in certain deployments that has gone beyond our national security goal. That we've gotten involved in conflicts that are none of our business. Or we got involved in a conflict that was our business and then we forgot what the mission was and we kind of slouched into capabilities and roles that we never should have really taken on. I subscribe to the Cap-Weinberger theory of using force. Cap Weinberger was the defense secretary for President Reagan. He said we should only intervene when the conflict has a direct national security tie to the United States. He defined it as lives of Americans are currently under threat, or very soon, if we don't deal with this issue, will be under threat. And number two, that we have a plan to win. If you're going to ask service members to leave their families, not be there for their daughter's graduation, put their lives on the line, you better give them a plan to win, a clear mission and the resources to win. In the current challenge of the day that we're talking about, ISIS, I do not believe that this administration has given a clear plan to win. I think they've given a political plan, which is, well, we're going to do some airstrikes, and that would make it better. Every single flag officer I have talked to, every military advisor I have talked to, every expert I've talked to have said that the airstrikes will be insufficient. And so I believe that because ISIS is a threat, that we ought to go in with a plan that actually works. And if that means ground troops, we need to make the case to the American people as to why that has to happen. I'm willing to do that because I want a plan that works, not a political plan.
Shifting gears again, under what circumstances should the federal debt limit be raised?
We have a fiscal crisis in this country. We have a spending problem. And so every opportunity, every bill that deals with spending or fiscal issues, I believe we should look at that as an opportunity to make progress on that problem. To just simply say we're going to have a blank check, whereas my opponent, Mr. Peters, would propose to have an automatic increase in the debt limit. I think that's foolhardy. I think that we ought to be looking at demanding reforms in finances in every single fiscal bill. I also believe that if we want to pass a real budget on time, that we have to have real accountability in Congress. Again, Mr. Peters talks about how he claims he has no budget, no pay. Let's do a fact check on that. Mr. Peters voted to allow Congress to remain paid even though they shut down the government. They got paid for every single day that they so-called got debited. There was no sanction, there was no accountability, there was no enforcement on what he claimed he did. It was all for show. And that's why I proposed the no budget, no pay for real. And that says if you don't fund the government on time, which is September 30th, is the end of our fiscal year, if you go into a shutdown, you didn't do your job. And if you don't do your job, you don't get paid. And it's not one of these little funny money things that the politicians do, which is, we're going to do no budget, no pay, but guess what? It's coming into our other pocket. That's what they did. And that's why they shut down the government. They had no penalty, no sanction. You want to see government get a budget done on time, take their pay away from every single day they miss the budget. That's the only way to solve this problem. And that's what I've proposed, and that's what I'm committed to achieve in my first term in Congress. I'm good, I'm good. Overcoming bronchitis is just not easy.
Okay. Since both of you have been elected, what legislation can you point to that you helped pass with bipartisan support?
Let me throw out three that I'm really proud of. Number one, the Sunshine Act in San Diego, unanimous vote. We got the Sunshine Act passed that requires that San Diego put its records online. That you are able to search and see, for example, contracts and how many bids were received on a government contract in San Diego. It's your money. You should know how we're spending it and who's getting it. The Sunshine Act, bipartisan. Number two, our small business regulatory relief bill that I laid out, where we were able, under a bipartisan vote, to cut red tape on the city's business improvement districts. These are small business improvement districts that do marketing, do business development, training, education, for each zone in the city to promote small businesses. We got that done on a bipartisan vote. It made it a lot easier for those small business groups to function. Third, the pension reform initiative, saving billions of dollars, dealing with our fiscal crisis in the city. Now, how did we get that done? We actually had 4 waves of pension reform in San Diego, starting in 2006. And in each wave, I was constantly moving our city closer to the final resolution. Did we get everything we wanted overnight? No. But I always looked to what was the long-term plan where we had to get to, and I always recognized that change sometimes means you build consensus one step at a time. The problem with folks in Washington is that you have extremists in both parties that will sit there and light their hair on fire in the town square if you don't accept every single idea. And if you don't agree with them 100%, you're suspect. They call you rhinos in the Republican Party and dinos in the Democrat Party. My view is, look, it's not, in business you don't get everything you want. So look to see what you can get done now, and then use that progress to build trust in dealing with some of the things where you don't agree later on. That's been my approach. That's why we've gotten bipartisan support.
Thank you. To continue on the same theme, what committees have been worked with and what is pending or passed that will help the middle class?
Committees?
What committees have you worked with and what is pending or passed that will help the middle class?
I'm not sure about the first part, but let me answer the second part, because the middle class is really what my focus is. And here's why. Again, there's nothing wrong with big business. Big business is great. That's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. But I'm more interested in small businesses, and here's why. Big business has the money to hire lobbyists. They have a voice at the table. They pay money to Democrats and Republicans, and they pretty much take care of themselves. My challenge and my indictment of the DC system is that no one's looking out for the little guy. No one's looking out for the small business. The small business doesn't have the money for the lobbyists. They don't have compliance departments. If you think about this, you go to a big business, they don't want regulation and mandates, but they're okay with it because they're so big they can absorb it. They pass the cost on to us, the consumer. They have compliance departments and lawyers and CPAs and legal analysts. I'm more interested in the small business owners' challenge because they don't have a compliance department. They are the compliance department. They've got to figure out the rule, the regulation, the tax code, and oftentimes they make mistakes because they can't possibly know everything. And so I want to take a look at how we get middle-class jobs by creating stronger small businesses. I want the middle class to be able to go from employee to owner. I want them to be able to have access to a job in terms of entry. And your small business sector or your self-employment sector are the huge stepping stones for them. In terms of a big accomplishment, not only the small business regulatory relief proposal I talked about earlier, but defeating the middle class tax increase in San Diego that Mr. Peters supported, that was a big proud day for us, because middle class was going to pay that tax increase, not big business.
We ask our border patrol agents to put their lives on the line to stop illegal immigration, but once illegal immigrants make it past that line of defense, there are fewer consequences and often rewards. Why?
Okay. I think that, again, it starts with border security, but it also has to include enforcement against businesses that provide jobs without verification of employment status. And again, the Republican Party seems more interested in talking about illegal acts by individuals than illegal acts by business, particularly big business. That's why I think we need to have E-Verify, and we have to have true sanctions for repeat offenders. When businesses habitually flaunt the law, they need to be held accountable for that. We haven't seen that level of accountability in enforcing our immigration laws. I think that, as we look at some of the changes in our visa programs and look at ways that we deal with the 11 million undocumented workers in this country currently, it's not one size fits all. You can't say, well, we're going to have one policy for all 11 million. Let's take a look at different categories of individuals that may be eligible for certain types of programs to bring them into compliance. I'm open to that, and I think we all should be. I talked to the Latino community, and they mentioned individuals with criminal backgrounds. And the Latino community and most Americans I talk to are very clear. Anyone with a criminal background needs to be removed from this country. And we've seen studies that it's about 400 to 500,000 people, so it's not a big portion of the 11 million, but it's sizable enough to say, look, if there's that much bipartisan agreement on an issue, let's commit the resources to get that done. There's an interesting bill by Congressman Jeff Denham of Northern California that would allow Dreamers the opportunity to receive a green card if they sign up for military service. I think that's pretty thoughtful. I think that's a reasonable proposal. And so let's start taking a look at segment by segment, areas where we have agreement, and then make those changes and bring the compliance that we need this long overdue.
Okay, should we fix or repeal the Affordable Care Act? It's a three-part question. Should I give you all three questions?
Give me all three and I'll try to roll it into one.
Yeah. Let's say, should we fix or repeal the Affordable Care Act? If fixed, what specifically needs to be fixed? What are the broader problems with our nation's healthcare system that you would like to address?
I want to fix healthcare. Let's take the labels off of it. Let's take the Democrat, Republican, team jerseys off, and just say we have a healthcare crisis in this country. That crisis is not driven by lack of innovation or lack of thoughtful treatments. It's driven by skyrocketing costs in providing care. It's made it unreachable for too many Americans to afford access to health care. That's what we have to address. How do we deal with the cost curve? How do we bend the cost curve so that we make it more affordable? Well, I think there are some things in Obamacare that I would keep, and I would compliment Democrats that, okay, these are some good ideas, let's keep them. Number one, I would keep the prohibition against pre-existing condition penalties. There's no reason for that, particularly when you have more people covered under health insurance. Number two, if you want to keep your kids on your policy after 18, fine, let's do that. Third, I would actually keep the healthcare exchanges. Ooh, Republicans don't like that. No, actually, I think that the healthcare exchanges are a good idea to solve a flaw in the market, which is individuals don't have bulk purchasing power. The exchanges give us bulk purchasing power because it's a wider group of people buying health insurance. But I would take the exchanges and I would privatize them. I would allow the private sector to manage them. Government should never have been building websites to transact business. I would go one step further. I would allow the healthcare exchanges to give insurance companies competition across state lines. I don't want us to have monopolies of a few healthcare insurance carriers per state. I want us to have a lot more competition. Then I would move on to cutting red tape in the medical industry, healthcare industry, on hospitals, on nursing homes, so that we can make it more affordable. Then I would go on to deal with frivolous lawsuits. Then I would go on to allow you to take any healthcare policy and redeem it on the exchange for a policy that fits your needs better. Sooner or later, you start getting a lot of people excited about healthcare reform. Not from a Democrat or Republican perspective, but from an American perspective, and that's the way we need to go.
I'm going to take advantage of being the moderator and ask two questions of you, which is gender-based and gender women studies, and these are big issues in our city.
Sure.
So the first one is, what are your views on raising the minimum wage? And related to that is, do you have any views on equal pay for equal work?
Okay, but I think minimum wage is not just a gender issue, it's a worker issue. I want to see us have more money go into the pockets of the American workers. And I also want to make sure that we have more jobs for people to apply. The best way to do that is to cut red tape, to make it more affordable for businesses to invest and expand, to be successful. There's a candidate running in Illinois, a Republican candidate for governor, who I think got it right. He said, am I open to changing and increasing the minimum wage? Yes. Provided that Democrats meet us halfway on tax reform and regulatory reform. And I think that's a constructive attitude to have. And so I would be open to changing and increasing the minimum wage, provided that we pay for it through regulatory reform, cutting the mandates so that we have dollars that are freed up in the cost of operating a business that then could be gain shared with our employees. When I ran my small businesses, I used to tell my employees, Look, if I hire someone, it's not just the salary. The cost per employee includes unemployment insurance, workers' compensation insurance, our legal bills. It includes the health insurance. It includes our general liability insurance.
Sorry to interrupt. Time's running out. I'm really interested about equal pay for equal work.
Okay, I'm going to cover it. All right, can I get 5 seconds?
Yes, please.
Okay, so that's how I believe we need to deal with the pay issues, is making it sustainable. Equal pay for equal work, I absolutely support it. I support the Lilly Ledbetter Act. I support the Paycheck Fairness Act. I want to make sure that as we implement those bills, though, that we don't have frivolous lawsuits. But those are common sense reforms to make sure that if people are doing jobs, that there's a defensible wage being provided that's equal.
Thank you.
See how easy that was?
Okay. Are you aware that San Diego is one of the cities with the largest amount of sex trafficking? And a lot of non-government organizations, universities, communities are very concerned about it because we're on the border, and I think that is what is leading to us having some high numbers. Besides local students being part of this whole issue, what are your views on that? How to handle it, or how to approach these issues?
Because of our proximity to the border, you're absolutely right. We do have a higher incidence of sex trafficking in San Diego than other parts of the country. And so I think that this is an issue where we have to continue to improve law enforcement's capabilities and awareness on this issue. About a decade ago, people didn't even know that this was going on. So we are making improvements in San Diego, but much more needs to be done. And so I think that we do need to have additional federal resources, best practices and funding, technical assistance to work with local law enforcement to deal with this issue. And so I'm committed to making sure that we do everything we can from a federal perspective to work with our local agencies to stop this.
One last question from one of the young members in our audience. Why are you going for the House of Representatives?
I think a lot of people asked me that question about the time that we had this issue of the mayor's race. And there was reasons why I saw what was going on in the city of San Diego as not being the same as a do-over. I no longer had my majority on the city council because Tony Young resigned and was replaced by someone who's more aligned with labor unions. Because going into the November election in 2012, I had 5 members of the council that I was already working with and ready to work with as mayor. Second, Bob Filner ran through a 5-year labor contract, which meant that my hands would be tied for 5 years. And it didn't really excite me that I had to wait 5 years before I could really start transforming the way the city's operating and business practices. Then I looked at, well, what did I do on the city council in 4 years? Could I do the same thing in Washington? And I came to the conclusion that, yeah, we could do a reform agenda in Washington like we did a reform agenda in San Diego. Yeah, instead of billions of dollars in liabilities in San Diego, you're talking trillions of dollars of liabilities. Instead of hundreds of millions of dollars in budget deficit, you're talking hundreds of billions of dollars in budget deficit in Washington. The problem is bigger, but the path to reform is the same. Don't worry about who gets credit. Don't worry about the party label. Just look for good ideas. Yes, lay out a bold, long-term plan, detailed plan, but be willing to look for opportunities to get segments of that plan implemented on an incremental basis. There's nothing wrong with the incremental reform. Big government wasn't built overnight. Big mandates weren't imposed overnight. So why do we expect that it's going to suddenly change overnight? It will change step by step if you take a constructive approach. And finally, don't worry about the political consequence of doing the right thing. If more members of Congress did that for both parties, we would be a better country.
Thank you very much. Your responses were wonderful. I think you get another 2 minutes to wrap it up and give us your final message for this evening.
Well, I appreciate you coming tonight. I have a gift, a parting gift for all of you. There are TV remote controls to fast forward through the commercials that we all have been subjected to. I'm proud of the fact that I've been running positive commercials for the most of this campaign, focusing on my record as a reformer. I'm willing to take on my own party when necessary, and take on special interests, very powerful special interests, to do the right thing. And I wanted to start the campaign off and really focus in on that to remind people kind of what motivates me, where I'm coming from. Because I think that what I'm trying to address is the frustration that many Americans, and San Diegans in particular, feel that their government is not responding to the issues that matter. Their government is broken. The problems are getting worse, not better. And all we see is fighting and dysfunction. I also want you to know that I tend to try to be blunt and candid in telling you where my views are. Now, I could be wrong in my views. Ask my partner, Jonathan. I'm typically wrong in those cases. But I want to give you an honest view of where I am. Unlike most politicians who, what I see them doing is they're trying to give you misunderstood agreement, rather than what I'd like to see in proper cases is understood disagreement. You're not going to agree 100% with anybody, but I hope that you agree with about 70 to 80% of what we had to say tonight, or what I had to say tonight. That makes us 70 to 80% friends, not 20 to 30% enemies. And even if you disagree with someone 80% of the time, recognize there's still 20% that you do agree on. And so why don't you just get that done? Get it over with. Let's get progress done on that 20%. That's the approach I'll take in Washington. And I hope that that's the approach you will take in this election. Thank you very much.
Thank you.